Speaking of faking it until you make it, on this episode of the Culture Cast, we're going to be talking about a movie that does advertise Chow Yun-Fat in it. But what are you begling me this month?
Oh man,
Are you begling me on this movie and this movie alone? Because where was Chow Yun-Fat, Mr. Mike White?
He was all over the poster. I thought he was going to be all over this.
Had you never seen this before?
I had never seen this one. Or maybe I was screwing it up with Witch from Nepal, but I think he's not even in that one that much. But I mean, yeah, it's like, oh yeah, Chow Yun-Fat. I mean, he's all over the poster and everything.
Isn't he?
Yeah. I mean, this was the same year, I think, as A Better Tomorrow. So it's like, okay, by this time he had broken out of the doing all the soap operas and stuff, and he had smaller roles and everything. But I was like, look at this guy on the poster. He's got the big pipe and all this stuff. This is fantastic. And he is the Deus Ex Chow Yun-Fat Mia.
Boy, isn't he? Deus Chow Yun, bro. Oh my God.
Have you ever seen a movie like this before?
No. And so to let you, the audience, know what in God's name we're talking about and why we're talking about it. It is what are we in? Like 5th, 6th annual Mike White March? Has it been that long? Oh, gosh. No. Are we on 5 now?
We did those depressing sci-fi films.
That was last year.
We did Japanese New Wave.
Yeah.
We did Jackie Chan, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
and what else?
4 then.
Okay. I wasn't sure if we ever made up for that awful month of blaxploitation that you had to do.
Oh, Petey Wheatstraw. It's like the episode of my show that will never die. Will never die. We all have that one episode that we're like, I wish people would stop listening to this. And it's that one and the episode for The Joker. That's another, that one is very, and then all the Bollywood movies, but that's a covert topic for a different show. To answer your question, no, I have not seen a film like this one. This film being The Seventh Curse, which, like Mike and I have kind of been mentioning, this is Chow Yun-Fat month.
一个好的故事，从一杯好的酒开始。
你對巫術認識咁深，我有冇得救？
血就係巫術之中最神秘同埋最複雜，亦都係最犀利一種。
鬼仔講係用咗8個細路仔血嚟到練成嘅，佢哋會飛行吸血，擋者必死。
why Chow Yun-Fat?
Why not?
Fair. I agree. I mean, why not? I have seen all of 2 Chow Yun-Fat movies. The third Pirates of the Caribbean movie, which barely counts.
Oh, God.
And then, what's the other one? Oh, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
Oh, yeah. That makes sense.
Right, yeah.
He did, I think, like 8 or 10 movies in 1986. Like I said, he was really coming into his own at this point.
Right.
I mean, before that, it was like, a handful of movies here and there every year, but he was very much in demand. So the Seventh Curse, I will not pretend to be any sort of expert when it comes to Hong Kong films or Asian films. I will just go on what I've seen before. And I've seen a few films that are of this ilk. Mostly I've seen Shaw Brothers films that are, how can you best describe them? They're like magical kung fu type films. The one that stands out for me is this one called Boxer's Omen, which is just wild. And there are other ones like Black Magic, and there's a few others that I've seen over the years. And it's funny because Boxer's Omen is the one that I've seen the most. And that movie made no sense to me the first time I saw it. It slowly started to make more sense. And it's funny because this movie follows a lot of the same pattern that one does, especially when it comes to, we're okay here in Hong Kong, but those weirdos in like Vietnam and Thailand and those other places, they're still really into all this black magic voodoo kind of stuff that is just so twisted, and there's rules to it, air quotes, but who knows what those rules are. And there's a lot of blood, a lot of gore, and a lot of boobs too. I don't know if this was category 3 or not, but it sure kind of leaned into that territory a few times.
There is definitely a difference between city Asians and jungle Asians, Mike. It's weird because they do treat the characters who live in Thailand like, well, they're characterized a certain way. And,
oh, yeah.
Yeah. Had I ever seen a movie like this, though, back to your initial question, no, I have not. But I will say, specifically, have I seen something like this? No. Have I seen things that I was watching the end of the movie with my family, and I was like, before I put it on, I was
boy.
Yeah, like the last 20 minutes specifically.
Mom, Dad, there's this guy, Mike White. He makes me watch all these horrible things.
Oh, it's okay. My lovely wife already told them.
I'm sure.
She was like, "This is a Mike White movie." That Mike White, that rascal.
Darn him.
But it was kind of like a little bit like Indiana Jones.
Very, yes.
Because he's a doctor, folks. Part-time. He's a doctor, all right. Part-time. This guy is very much in that same vein of has a respectable job outwardly, but is also like, kind of a grave robber, rascally adventurer.
Right. Well, he, in this case, is Dr. Yuen, who's Chin Sui Ho, who really is the main character of this. And when it comes to...
Yes, he is.
Yeah. When it comes to Chow Yun-Fat, he is the side character, or like the sidekick, Wisely. Though there were a whole bunch of movies with this Wisely character, and they're all based on these books.
Right. And so is the actual movie itself is based on a book as well.
Which, I mean, come on. I wish I could find the source material for this in English, right?
Right. Oh my God in heaven.
Holy cow.
Yeah, it's whoever these novels, were for, which I assume there were plenty of people in Hong Kong that wanted to read these kinds of novels. What a treat these must be to read, because these must be wild.
It feels like Robert Howard stuff, but transplanted to what he was probably writing these in like the 70s and 80s. And the author actually shows up in the movie. My God, what a role this guy has, where he's just like sitting around, like drinking brandy, surrounded by all of these buxom babes, and he's just like, oh, well, my friends tell the best stories, and oh, here's my friends now, and here's our two main characters, one more main than the other, and they toast. And I love how the screen, it's like we've got the author in the background between them, and then them, foregrounded, and it's just like, we're about to start our new adventure. But before that, even, it's almost like there's a cop movie that starts, and I'm like, okay, this is, Chow Yun-Fat action. All right, I can get this. And then we have that weird little flying demon worm thing.
The little ghost. Unleash the little ghost.
God.
Yeah. Lordy Lord. There's a lot going on. Yeah. So in this movie, like you mentioned, Dr. Yuen, who's not played by Chow Yun-Fat,
right,
is infected with a blood curse when he goes to Thailand to save a woman, and then he goes back to Thailand to break said blood curse and save the woman who essentially has the blood curse as well. I guess they're linked because of the blood curse. I can't really sure.
Well, we start in the present, and then we get the flashback to show where he got.
It's a double flashback. It's a flashback within a flashback on top of everything else, which is fucking insane. When I was watching it last night, I was like, wait, this is a flashback? Because the story, when, like you said, the part where it's like the author, that's clearly taking place after the adventure.
Oh, yeah.
And then they flash back to that, and they flash back again.
Yeah. Can you blame them?
No, but it is hard to follow. It is a little hard to follow. Other than, and this is something that we've talked about, almost not exclusively, but a lot with foreign language films. Sometimes it's hard to follow the first time.
Yeah. Well, this doesn't help too, because there's the subtitles for this. The subtitles are really nice, but
for the most part,
there's some misspellings. I mean, it's not like the typical, I hope nobody gets offended with me using this term. They're not the typical English subtitles that you would have from the old Hong Kong films where you've got the characters and then the English translation. And the English translation was actually written during the script phase. So there would be things happening on screen that didn't match up to what the script was on the thing.
Right.
And you would just get the weird misspellings and, no pointy gun at boss, like those kind of things.
Ricky, you are our hopes and our dreams.
Yeah. You get a little bit better subtitles here, but mine kept flashing off. They would just show up for a second and then disappear. And I'm like, wait, what did they say? And yeah, the timing was very bad on them.
I will say, though, if you watched it without subtitles, I think you could figure out what's going on for the most part. Within reason, maybe.
I mean, I think you might not be any better off with the subtitles. How's that?
That's fair. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's one of those movies where when I was watching it, and I would think that the director Lam Nagai Kai would agree. What is important is the action and almost nothing else. Why do I say that? Because the action is really good. It's really well shot. It's really well blocked. It's really well paced. There is some problems with the lighting at the end. My God in heaven.
Oh, boy.
The climax of this movie is a mess, but to put it lightly. But I think everything else, for the most part, is really well shot. He knows what he's doing. And I would almost go as far as to say the quality of the movie's action and kind of the driving force of the plot makes up for the lackluster story and dialogue. Because the dialogue's not great. Even if the translation's a little, again, it's 98% good. It's not like the plot's doing anything particularly exciting. It's not like it's doing anything we've never seen before.
Right. Like you said, it is very Indiana Jones. We definitely have that. Though it's I mean, there are certain parts that are more Indiana Jones than others. I mean, but it's like if Indiana Jones was just living amongst the Jovitos more, because those poor Thai people, I mean, they're really portrayed as backwards. And I want to say that one of the things I noticed was certain films. There was one called The Heroic Trio, which is fantastic. Maggie Cheung's in that as well. And the villain of that film reminded me of the villain of this film because I think it was a male actor, but dubbed with a female voice. And I want to say that's what was happening in this one. There's definitely something going on with the voice of let's call him the witch doctor. And I think it's to add that like strangeness to this character because he's got this kind of like kiss makeup on at times and he's got this female voice, and then
he's got a headband and the long metal hair.
Oh yeah. And he's very much like I Love the Dead kind of thing. Very Alice Cooper.
Yeah, he could be the front man for Motley Crue.
Oh yeah. And I mean, this movie, it does have a lot of like good roles to it. I mean, I did mention Maggie Cheung. I love her, though she, again, kind of underutilized, like shows up as that photographer doing the big action set piece. And she's there, but she doesn't have a whole lot to do in more of it. And then there's there's a couple female actresses in this. There's one that was in Return of the Demon, which that's a personal favorite. I love that movie so much. And then I don't think she's the one with the fucked up face, though. It doesn't matter what's on your face. It matters what's in your heart.
Thanks, Chow. Chow Yun said it best. He really did.
And they cut that to those credits so fast after he says that.
Yeah. This is one of those movies where it just ends. It just ends. Yeah. It just there's the credits. Nope. Fuck you. Were you expecting more? That's your fault. That's your fucking fault. What were we watching recently where it did that? It was something that you and I were talking about where it just cut. It was just like the end. Do you remember that? Boy. Something recently where it was just like, it was either you and I or it was for an episode of the show where it was just like, it just ended. And it was like, okay, like, great. Like, there you go. Like,
was it one of the Begley films? Was it Now You See Him, Now You Don't?
Very well may have been. This movie is also, I'm not going to say barely a movie, but it is barely a movie.
It moves though, man.
Oh my God. Yeah.
So fast.
Yeah.
It doesn't give you a chance to breathe. And they're like, I was going to mention Ken Boyle, who's like the only European actor in the film.
Other than there's a woman that Dr. Yuen is, getting it on with. Because, he's a smooth operator who loves the pussy. It's just his character. Every woman throws herself at him. I love it. It's great.
Wouldn't you?
Great. Yeah. Chin Soo-ho is great. He, for as much as Chow Yun-Fat's not in this movie, Chin Soo-ho is really good. So it doesn't. I'm not saying like makes up for it because the movie's bad, but I didn't miss Chow Yun-Fat because Chin Soo-ho is so good.
Well, it's like Chow Yun-Fat just shows up at certain points. And I would say that
like in the last 10 minutes. Just,
he's
everybody,
at
I'm
the beginning. Maybe he shows up I think he shows up in the middle at one point to like lay a little exposition on us. And then, towards the end, I think he might even talk about the seventh curse and all this stuff.
Yeah, he's like, I know how to break it because someone from the other clan told me, and I need a black cow and a black dog.
Right.
Okay. And
they love playing with blood and animal sacrifices in these movies. I'm glad we didn't see
scene where the person got squished up.
Oh God!
What the fuck was that?
Well, I was going to talk about poor Ken Boyle, who ends up like his whole face, after he gets splattered with that goo, that slime from Nickelodeon, that he just like rips his own face off and stuff. And I'm just like, wow, I felt so bad for him. I mostly know him as being one of the real big baddies in Armor of God, but in here he's barely there. And then when he gets dispatched so quickly and in such a vile way.
I didn't know what to expect with this movie because, again, like I was saying with the Indiana Jones thing, I don't personally find Indiana Jones to be gory films, but they do kind of push the envelope further than those kinds of movies do because, I'm not saying everybody forgets, but Let's see. At the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark, 2 characters' faces melt and 1 head explodes. And you more or less get to see it.
It's basically like if you took that scene in the Well of the Souls when Marion is freaking out, which always makes me wonder, like, is this a dream or is this real? Because when Indy shows up and just grabs her by the shoulder or whatever, it's just like, boom, it's over.
Right.
But before that, you get that whole like nightmare sequence where you've got the corpse with the snake coming out of its mouth and she's screaming. I mean, it's like that for 90 minutes almost.
Pretty much. Do you ever notice something? There's an interesting parallel. That scene in Indiana Jones always reminds me of another scene in Ghostbusters 2.
Oh, okay.
The train, when they're in the subway, and Winston
Right.
does the exact, or I guess they all 3 do the same thing, and they all look around.
Yeah.
And that's more explainable. The thing in Indiana Jones is never explained at all. Actually, I just watched the movie 2 weeks ago. It's not explained.
Yeah. No, it's not.
Yeah.
It's kind of, I mean, it feels like a little bit of, let's say, preparation for Poltergeist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, sure. But yeah, to your point, this movie is replete, especially in the last 10 minutes, with just gore. People's heads being smashed, their arms being ripped off. At one point, like we mentioned, there's this kind of small Kuato-esque flying puppet. Looks like Kuato, kind of looks like the baby from Eraserhead. I don't know how to explain it. It looks like a floating sperm, really.
Yeah, but it's got those. It kind of reminds me of those, like, what is it, like Indonesian creatures that are just like the woman's head with the entrails.
Sure,
but it's like that. But yeah, it's all one piece. Yeah, it's so strange looking. And I like how they turn it from evil to good. There's that scene where they all have the red curtains and they all like come in on the creature. And then the next time you see it, it's fighting against the bad creature that is just like, we can't really afford an alien costume.
Oh my
Maybe
God.
it's kind of like a kaiju. We're not really sure what this is. I mean,
but it starts out as a skeleton.
Starts out as a
skeleton.
Muppet skeleton. And that first time that it shows up and you've got the glowing blue eyes, and I'm just like, oh my God, this is the funniest thing, especially when he's fighting against it. And you can just tell that he's pulling the puppet towards him, but pretending to be pushing away at the same time. So funny. And then, yeah, that thing shows up again at the end, and I'm just howling the entire
you
time.
And me both. the blue eyes spice monster is what we should call it, because it has like rotoscoped blue eyes too. It's fucking it's a dude monster.
The eyes.
it's really funny because it starts out as a skeleton, and then just for whatever reason its face just goes and just it essentially, I mean, I assume the trick was there's like a bladder inside and they inflated the bladder and it inflates the face out, but it's a really effective effect.
Well, good. I'm glad you liked it.
Oh, come on. This is right up my alley. This is the kind of movie where I've seen it once now, and I would be curious to see the other films in the series to see where they lie kind of in the spectrum. But this is so much fun. I would rewatch this with a group of people. I think people would enjoy watching this together.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Especially the last 10 minutes where it's just for 10 minutes. Just I'm not even exaggerating. Mike can clarify, but it is kung fu noises for almost 10 minutes straight.
Oh, and then fucking Chow Yun-Fat shows up out of nowhere with a rocket launcher.
Oh my God.
And toasts this thing. And I'm just like, oh man, it's not dead. It's not don't dead get yet. Close. But luckily my boy reloaded his rocket launcher.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah, when he showed up and he just is sporting the lightest looking rocket launcher in the history of movie props. He's holding it. He's trying to make it look a lot heavier than it clearly is. Yeah, and he shoots the poor monster and it just slumps over. I can't believe they walked up to it. What's funny about this movie is, it reminds me of Indiana Jones, and then it has obviously it feels like other Hong Kong movies I've seen, which is almost primarily, I would say, only Jackie Chan movies. movies. It feels very much like a Jackie Chan movie too.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the only other Hong Kong cinema I've personally seen. So I think it's almost going to feel that way either way.
Right.
It's a Golden Harvest film, right? I mean,
yeah, I can see, especially when it comes to, like I said, Armor of God, because you have very much an Indiana Jones flex in that one as well.
Yes.
I'm really curious because, you mentioned the other films, and there were other adaptations of this, like Wisely and Dr. Choi characters. And the director even went back and did another one, The Cat, which I remember that trailer and that box cover when I would go haunting Chinese grocery stores, and I would see all these videos, and I remember the cat box specifically. So now I'm really curious to check that out. He also did Erotic Ghost Story. He did one called Story of Ricky, which I know some people love. Story of Ricky.
Is that Ricky O? Is that Ricky O?
It
No.
might be. It's the one that you've seen the clips from, where the guy crushes the other guy's head.
Yeah, Ricky. That's the thing I was quoting earlier. Ricky, you are our hopes and our dreams. Yeah, Ricky,
that's right.
Yeah. You're not a fan?
Not a big fan for whatever reason. I guess it was just that, like, because it's very anime type stuff, which it's live action anime.
Yeah, it is a manga, so
yeah. I mean, and I could understand that, but I was just like, this really isn't doing it for me. But I mean, the director had he was very solidly in the idea of mixing action and ghost stories. I mean, almost everything that I'm looking at in his filmography as a director anyway, because he was also cinematographer and writer and a few other things, but like his directing credits, there's a lot, like the Ghost Snatchers, like I mentioned already, Erotic Ghost Story. So it's like he was very into this stuff.
Yeah. And it shows in this movie because it is a blending of adventure and ghost. I don't want to say ghost stories. I guess it is a ghost story or ghost. Yeah, because I don't know. It is I don't know. It reminded me so much of Indiana Jones, and I don't consider those ghost stories. But
no, but really, the first one is probably the most supernatural. I mean, of course, in the second one, Kali has to, the guy pulling the heart out and everything. In the third one, you get more of the Christian ghost type stories. But
right.
I would say at the heart of each Indiana Jones, there's a supernatural thing. And I think that's where some movies really miss the mark, is if they lean too heavily into supernatural or just stay away from it completely. I mean, it's a spice. I'm doing that little arm thing with the guy adding the salt. Yeah. I mean, that's Spielberg with the supernatural right there.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. It's like comedy and horror, right? It's a careful balance of the two, because there have been movies that I have watched where I'm like, this needs the supernatural. This needs that. But they don't give it to us. And then there are movies where it's like, this is too much. I don't need any of this.
I'm trying to remember like King Solomon's Mines and some of those, like the real, like, hardcore, we are going to rip off Indiana Jones, like post indie movies. And I mean, that one was the worst for me. I mean, even the soundtrack was like one note off of the indie march,
I've never even heard of that movie.
Oh, that's Richard Chamberlain, and I want to say Sharon Stone. It's not good. It's really not good.
Well, I would say that's the thing about Indiana Jones. I know we're not, we're still talking about the movie in a roundabout way, but there have been very few movies that I would consider could go toe to toe with those first the four Indiana Jones movies. That fourth movie is not that bad. It's bad, but it's not that bad. It's bad. It's weak in the spots where its weaknesses are most apparent on screen, but it still has some redeeming qualities. It's not like Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. And that's the thing. I mean, if you compare Indiana Jones 4 to essentially anything else that we've gotten like that, it's still somehow much better in a lot of ways. Like even in a lot of ways than Yeah, well, the Star Wars stuff. But
Yeah.
there haven't been very many things that come close to those Indiana Jones movies in sense of tone and style. This is a lot closer, and again, this is closer than I was expecting or
Right.
even anticipated. I didn't know what this was going to be when I sat down to watch it, frankly.
Yeah, and personally, I didn't know either. Like I said, I think I might have mixed it up with Witch from Nepal, which, looking at the story synopsis of that, it is very similar. Also, Chow Yun-Fat. And that's also like, hey, guy goes away and gets, in one he's cursed, and another he gets special powers, and he has to fight the supernatural. So I'm like, okay, it's same year and everything, but yeah, I didn't really know what I was walking into. And I'll tell you the truth, Chris, other than when we talk about the John Woo films on your Patreon episode, and other than Full Contact, which I think rounds out this month of Mike White March, Chow Yun March, I guess we can call it.
Chow Yun-White.
Yeah, I haven't really seen a lot of these movies. This is more like, hey, let's go on an adventure together, much like Dr. Wisely.
Yeah, I think you're the Chow Yun-Fat one here.
Oh
Obviously.
man, with the PH,
Chow Yun PH fat with that fucking pipe and just blowing huge clouds.
I love it.
Smoke.
He's awesome.
He is so cool, and again, like, he's written that way, but he just seems cool. He seems like a cool guy. His character seems cool, and that's the other thing. Like, these are characters the way I always look at adventure movies is, for me personally, and again, this is a completely subjective. This has no objectivity to it. The kinds of movies that I like, these kinds of adventure movies, are the ones where those are the characters I'd want to be with. Right. I would want to go on an adventure with them. I wouldn't want to be them. I'd want to be on an adventure with them. And I know that there are plenty of people that want to be Indiana Jones. And that's led so many people into the field of archaeology, and then they realize, well, Indiana Jones, archaeology is done primarily in a library. He was on point in Last Crusade, but I would go on an adventure with these characters. And that's kind of, for me, it's like a buddy cop movie. Like, do I want to spend more time with these characters? Yes. Well, then that's a success for these adventure movies, because, again, you have effectively 5-6 characters in this movie. That's it. It's not a very big cast of characters, other than all of those dudes in black and red who are just getting mercilessly gunned down. I do like that dichotomy in this movie, where there doesn't seem to be a line between, because you notice it in like a lot of the Jackie Chan martial arts movies versus like his cop movies, he doesn't use guns. It's all about the martial arts. In this movie, it's like they're martial arts for a while, and then all of a sudden they're just shooting at each other. Yes. Just mowing dudes down. And it's normally there's like kind of like a hard line in between them. But in this movie, it's like, no, there is none. They're just, and then they're just going to start shooting and just mowing these mugs down with wanton abandon. It's a wild movie. It really, thinking about it, it's almost like a comic book in movie form. Like this, I would be curious to read the book, because I wonder what the book is like the characterization of the characters.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I was reading a little bit about The Legend of Wisely, the 87 film. So the next year this came out.
Sure.
And the description on Wikipedia is just like, blah, 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 much like Indiana Jones. So I'm like, okay, sounds like these are all cut from a very similar cloth. But going back and looking, I talked about how the books are probably from like the 70s, 80s. The first one goes all the way back to 1963. So he was cranking on these things. There are 145 of these, and the last one came out in 2004.
Holy fuck.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a lot of books.
Yeah. And also, to your point, comic book versions of it, radio dramas of it, all the way back in the 80s, they were doing radio dramas, television series. So these were huge.
Yeah. And that was, again, I didn't know much beforehand, because I don't like to know stuff about stuff before I watch it. I didn't know what to expect, but man, coming away from this movie, my feeling was this character must be a big thing in maybe not China or, Asia, but clearly Hong Kong or Hong Kong cinema, this character must be a thing that people like. And clearly it is. And what's funny is, as two white dudes in the United States talking about this movie, if someone in Hong Kong hears this, they're going to be like, of course he is, you fucking idiots.
Yeah.
Which is really unfortunate because there are 4 Indiana Jones movies.
Right.
4. There are 100 and how many of the books of this? You see even with the amount of Indiana Jones books there are, which I think it's like 15, that still is not even a fifth of how many books there are. Or TVs, like you said, TV shows, movies. There are tons of adaptations of this characters. Because clearly, again, it's kind of a little James Bond and it's kind of a little Indiana Jones. It's got that like debonair thing, but he's a doctor who's doing, he's a doctor who shoots guys with a machine gun. He's,
right.
Yeah.
As you do. Yeah.
As you do. The Hippocratic Oath, do no harm and kill guys with a machine gun at close range. I'm curious for you, now that we're kind of on the subject, what are some Indiana Jones kind of close movies for you that come the closest? Because I think we might have like 1 or 2 that are crossovers.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the bad example for me is like King Solomon's Mines.
Sure.
The good example for me is Armor of God, and more Armor of God 2 than the first Armor of God. I'm not a big fan of the first one necessarily. I'm trying to think of some other good Indiana Jones type movies. I mean,
I know one that you and I both really like.
Yeah.
The Mummy.
Oh, fuck yeah. Yes.
Yeah, that for me, boy. I say it all the time. Like that for me is, I think, the closest anyone's ever gotten. And in a lot of ways, and this is going to be sacrilegious, it's almost better in a lot of ways. Because the mythology of the character of the villain of that movie is throughout the movie. It takes place in Egypt. It's all Egypt. I know it's fake Egypt, serialized Egypt, whatever. But pulped Egypt, but it's that 1999 movie. You can't beat that movie. You really can't.
No, I'm trying to think too. Like Indiana Jones, like he went against Nazis twice, which I kind of objected to him dipping back into that well.
Expected number 5. I guarantee we're going to get a Nazi fight in flashback because
boy,
I guarantee it. There's no way we don't, because Indiana Jones and Nazis and Indiana Jones, peanut butter and jelly. I mean,
well, and especially these days, where we have to remind people that Nazis are bad.
I know, weird,
yeah,
shocking.
So strange.
I know.
But it's like I'm trying to think of like he had like the guy. Of course, there's Belloc. And there's Adolf Hitler. I mean, I think the villains in the first Indy are the best villains, because then I'm going to the second, third, fourth movies and like Cate Blanchett. I'm sorry, I love you, Kate, but just you were a lousy villain. The dude who takes the drinks from the wrong grail, not really the strongest villain in the world. And then Molokan or whatever.
Molaram. The only villain that Indy fights hand to hand in the entire series.
Right.
By the way.
Really, again, kind of weak sauce, but like, yeah, you get the mummy, the titular mummy. He's a badass. And plus Arnold Vosloo is just amazing in that movie.
Yeah. Talk about making the most out of one role. Like,
boy.
Almost nobody knows Arnold Vosloo for anything else, and he has been in other things. It's that.
Yeah. No, I mean, I mostly knew him from Hard Target before, just because it came first. And then he was in those weird Darkman sequels.
Right. Oh my God, you're right. Yeah. Holy shit, yeah.
But then
Revenge of Durant.
Yes.
Oh God.
But then frankly, it's the Mummy, and then I'm sure Arnold's probably still working today. Oh, I know.
G.I. Joe.
G.I. Joe, yeah, where he wasn't Destro, which I'm like, why weren't you actually perfect casting for me? Vin Diesel is Destro, but why wasn't Vosloo Destro? Why Eccleston? That didn't make any
right.
sense.
Oh God. Well, wasn't the other thing with Destro in the first movie? He was just the dude Destro until like the last 5 minutes of the movie.
Well, it was like the Cobra Commander.
Right.
Know? Yeah.
Oh, played by Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
Yes.
Oh my God. I bet he wishes that was not on his IMDb filmography.
Yeah. I will tell you, like, there are certain things about the second one that I hate, mummy movies I'm talking about. But his heartbreak when Oxydamoon betrays him at the end and runs away, and he gets to see like Evie rescuing Rick, and then he tries to have Oxydamoon do the same thing for him, and she runs away. You just see his heart break, and the end of The Mummy 2 is definitely just such a great moment.
Man, you know what I'm thinking now? It was almost a shame that they cast The Rock in that movie, because if they had taken the Scorpion King out, it's actually a pretty good movie.
Yeah.
Like he's the worst part of that movie in a lot of ways. The corridor crew CGI chuckle fest aside.
Yeah, I mean, there was the kid in that one too, wasn't there?
Yeah. Freddie both plays their son. Adding kids to movies is just a fucking mistake.
But at least it was the original Evie. I mean, when you start swapping out your main characters and nobody blinks, well, yeah.
Well, hey, you know what? It is 2022, and they are now pandering to people both your and my age now with things. So there is a likelihood that we get The Mummy 4. So who knows? Hey.
Starring Tom Cruise?
Oh,
oh, man.
I can't, there are days of my life where I'm glad I forget that movie exists, and then I remember it. And it's just, you know what the saddest thing about that movie is? A movie like this, The Seventh Curse, did that better in 1986 with like 1/100th of the budget.
Yes. Yeah. Oh God. Yes.
It's essentially the same story. Guy fights weird monster in the middle of nowhere and prevails. I mean, God.
But this movie didn't rip off American Werewolf in London.
Oh my God! Right. I totally forgot about that.
Had Russell Crowe shown up with the pipe like Wisely, then maybe things would be different. But
and then they put the Book of the Dead in that movie to try to tie it back into the original Mummy. It's just like, no, nobody. The only people that want this are you, not us. Yeah, I'm trying to think of some other Indiana Jones kind of adjacent movies. I don't know, that Mummy, the 99 Mummy is kind of the one that always just is at the forefront of my mind. I don't know, supposedly, I haven't seen it, but I have played the games that it would be based on. Right. That Uncharted movie may be kind of in that vein, which wouldn't be surprising given that the video game I've always said is the best thing that's Indiana Jones that just doesn't have the character in it. So
it feels like I think Perils of Gwendolyn might have been the name of it. I mean, there were definitely, like, in the wake of Raiders, there were definitely a lot in the early 80s, early to mid 80s. But yeah, I'm hard pressed to remember them just because so many of them were like, oh, what are you doing? This is, but especially like cheaper action films, like it wasn't like they said, oh, well, we're going to outdo Indiana Jones with this big budget thing. It was more like, oh, well, we can do that. I mean, what is it? It's a guy with the whip and a hat and a gun. We can do that, of course.
It's definitely not the full force and might of ILM behind them or anything. Yeah.
I would think possibly like Romancing the Stone might move into that territory. And then in that new movie with Sandra Bullock, which basically looks like Romancing the Stone with her and Channing Tatum.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this Uncharted thing, like somebody was like, oh, well, there's this other thing that Nathan Fillion did with Uncharted and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like,
that is pretty good. That's kind of like that Tom Jane Punisher thing, though.
Yeah. But
where it's like,
I don't know these things.
Right. It's like, this is good, but like this ultimately goes nowhere, so don't get your fucking hopes up. I've seen that Tom Jane Punisher thing one time, and I will never rewatch it because I'm like, why am I going to torture myself with like this thing that's so good that is just this like effectively a fucking fan film, a
Right.
well-made fan film, mind you, but a fan film nonetheless.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't. The idea of what Indiana Jones is and how you would approach making a movie like it does seem to be something that is not easy to achieve because, again, the fourth movie is not even that good. And it's an Indiana Jones movie. It's a bad Indiana Jones movie made by people who are making an Indiana Jones movie.
Well, and it's funny, too, because Indiana Jones, I mean, I keep mentioning King Solomon's Mines. That's an adaptation of the same story that had been done all these times. So like some people would be like, well, Indiana Jones was just a ripoff of all these previous things. And I remember when the movie came out, people were like, oh, well, there's this other serial where this guy was on a horse, and there's this other serial where there was this. And it's like, yeah, we know it was based on serialized adventures. That's why you have these peaks every like 10 minutes. It's basically the end of the reel is how that movie worked. I mean, my God, the end of the opening scene with the boulder chasing him, that could be the end of the entire film. That's got that much excitement in that opening. And to your point, that's a James Bond opening. You know? Because it really, like, other than introducing Belloc, doesn't do that much for the narrative. We are introduced to the characters and we get that kind of stuff, but it's like, yeah, you could lop that out if you wanted to. Why would you? But you could.
Right. And same with this movie. It's the same thing. You have the opening, which ultimately goes nowhere and has nothing to do with anything else, to the point where nothing else in the movie is cops and robbers.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of the movie is, which, like you said, it is so weird because in Indiana Jones, the first scene is the Jovitos, and then the rest of the movie is the Ark. In this, it's the first is like a shootout. I guess yeah. And then he goes in as the decoy with the bomb.
Right.
But then then there's nothing else past that.
No, I mean, again, that introduces us to him, to Maggie Chung a little bit. That's about it. You know? Yeah.
And they do have their Indiana Jones moment in this movie. They straight up rip Indiana Jones off with that Buddha head rolling towards Dr. Yuen.
Yeah.
And they do the thing that Indiana Jones doesn't do, which is give us the fake out of I guess Indiana Jones doesn't give us the fake out of he's been squished. In this, it's the barely. They do it in the third movie. They do it in Last Crusade.
Yeah, with the cliff, right? With
the cliff and the tank and the
in the first movie, they give us the fake out of Marion being dead.
Right, which I don't even understand how they, like, where did she go?
I don't know. That's always been an interesting thing for me, too.
Yeah, but in the third one, they have the fake out, but in this movie, they do the fake out with the boulder. Right. Which I thought was, he's not going to die.
Well, and hats off to Dick Way, too, as Black Dragon, because really, I would say if you were to go in order of importance, it would probably be Dr. Yuen, it'd be Black Dragon, a few other characters, and then Wisely. You know?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. We weren't kidding. Like, if you do end up watching this movie, dear listener, which I think you should, it's fun. And God, in this day and age, don't we all need a little bit of fun in our lives? Don't watch it for Chow Yun-Fat. I mean, it's just watch it for everything else, but know that Chow Yun-Fat really is Deus Ex Chow Yun. I mean, it's.
Yeah. I know. I hope I'm not doing a bait and switch on you.
No, I don't.
For the next few movies.
I don't care. I mean, again, we just did an entire month of Begley on Begley where the movies were really good and Ed Begley was not really in them. So
Ed Begley looked at the movie and then walked past it. Like he might have seen it on television once.
Yeah, it's like those things where it's like you go to those really nice cocktail bars and it's like, this is a smoked cocktail. What does that mean? They put it in a thing and it smells like smoke. They moved it over. It's scented of Chow Yun-Fat. Yeah. I'm disappointed, though, that they never did another movie with these actors as these characters. Because for me, this feels like, again, like Indiana Jones, they got that equation down first movie. They understood. They knew what they needed to do. That's what happens when you have Lucas and Spielberg and Kasdan in the same room together. I mean, that's just, fucking Christ. Yeah. But it feels like they kind of had something here.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
yeah, it feels like they could have made a whole franchise out of this.
Right. Yeah. And Chow Yun-Fat never plays the character again.
Nope.
Shin Soo-ho never plays. This is a one-off.
Mm-hmm.
Which is weird in and of itself because these characters are so ubiquitous that they introduce them to us for the benefit of the one or two people in the audience who don't know the characters. Otherwise, they wouldn't even need to introduce these goddamn characters to us.
Right.
Right? That's the insane part. Again, they're introducing the characters for the benefit of the audience, but my assumption is the audience knew who these characters were.
That's what it feels like. I mean, especially because of the way that they're introduced, where it's just like them drinking Remy Martin. And I watched the credits all the way through, and there's a big, Remy Martin thing at the end.
Well, that's an expensive bottle of hooch that they got on that table, man. That's like a $10,000 bottle of liquor, man.
Yep.
I really like this movie, Mike.
Oh, good. I'm so glad to hear that.
Yeah. It was a lot of fun, which again, having seen the Chow Yun-Fat movies that I have seen.
Oh boy.
Yeah. This is, again, to be fair though, I guess not. I haven't seen Crouching Tiger I've seen it once when it came out. Pirates of the Caribbean 3, he's about in that movie as much as he's in this one, really.
Yeah. Less, actually. I think he might have more screen time in this one.
Yeah.
Though you could fight me on that because I barely remember that movie.
It's okay. I don't think anything important happened.
Okay.
Well, no, because they're rebooting it. They're rebooting
the other
anyways.
two movies. I mean, the second and third, I barely remember, and I'm just like, did I see those? Was I drunk?
The second one ends with Sparrow getting eaten by the Kraken. You remember that, right? There's a pretty good shot of him like from behind, like facing down the Kraken, and it like eats him.
I guess, and then he ends up in some like upside down world or something.
Yeah, like the edge of the world the world's end, because that's where they end up going. The third movie is the what's it? The fucking Spock movie.
Oh, okay.
Right, they're going to save Jack Sparrow the way they go to save Spock in The Quest for Spock. Or what is that? What's that one called? The Quest for Spock?
Search
for Spock.
That's you're thinking of The Quest for Peace.
Right. And then
which is Superman 4. Yeah.
What's the Star Trek movie with the whales? The Voyage Home.
The Voyage Home. Yeah.
Yeah, that movie's great.
Yes, it is. I mean, frankly, all those Pirates of the Caribbean movies are basically Indiana Jones films as well.
Yeah. You know what? They kind of are. They kind of are, aren't they?
Yeah. Which means, in turn, being rip-off of both The Mummy and Pirates of the Caribbean, that means that Jungle Cruise is very much a...
I haven't seen it, but I kind of assumed it would be like that.
You take those two movies, you stick them in the blender, there you go. There's Jungle Cruise.
You know what game? Well, it is based off of a game. You know what movie is kind of Indiana Jones-esque? Jumanji, the second one.
Oh, yeah.
Which I liked it a lot more than I thought I would.
I really like that movie. I don't mind the second one. The old jokes get a little old, but
I never even saw it.
Oh, really? It's got Awkwafina, who I think is completely hot, so I'll watch it. But there's a lot of like, hey, we're old men trapped in these bodies, because Danny Glover and Danny DeVito suddenly are in these bodies rather than it being the young kids. So
interesting.
Yeah.
It should have been Danny Glover and Joe Pesci.
Oh my God. Yeah, like Gone Fishing. It could be a sequel to Gone Fishing.
Reuniting the stars of the cult classic Gone Fishing.
You love them in Gone Fishing. Now see them together again in Jumanji 3, Part 2.
You love them in Gone Fishing, a film where someone died while making it. The saddest fact of all. Christ almighty. Yeah. Mike, would you skip or watch this film? What do you think?
Oh, fuck yeah, I would watch this. I want to watch it again just to see if I can understand it a little bit better. And I want to rush out now and rewatch or watch Witch from Nepal, as well as Her Vengeance and The Cat and some of these other films by the same director, especially Her Vengeance, because it's got my boy Lam Ching-ying in it, who I fucking absolutely love. And I haven't watched it yet, so bring it on, man.
Lam Ching-ying.
Yeah, Mr. Vampire himself.
Mr. Vampire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where Sui Ho Chin also was in Mr. Vampire. So another good, like, this one really goes more towards the comedy horror stuff, but I love how these Hong Kong films play with horror elements, and sometimes they're weirdo shit like this, which I love.
Dudes turning into maggots.
Funny. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Mealworms all over the place. And oh my God.
So
you have to see.
Actually disgusting. Like fucking Evil Dead level of cheap. It's the effect. When an effect is so cheap, sometimes cheap effects look the grossest. Right?
You have to see Boxer's Omen because it is so fucked up, man. Yeah. And it's like Evil Dead in the way that Evil Dead has like every color of blood under the rainbow. That one does as well. And there's just like, oh, we're going to take this guy and sew him up inside of a crocodile carcass. And then we're going to use this bat blood to do this. It's so wild. It is wild.
I mean, I saw this movie where a woman sits in a bathtub of blood and then it turns white. So
yeah, oh yeah,
bubbling. Just get this blood and get it boiling, and then we'll bathe in this boiling blood. Sure,
I love it.
Sure,
I love all these like weird remedies for things.
Yeah, get the eyes of the Buddha statue. Which, by the way, the two characters in this film, they're like, masters, let us be. We just want to take the ashes. And they just fucking trash the place anyways. Like, maybe these Buddhist monks maybe they were right in trying to stop you from destroying your temple. And then they swallow the ashes.
Swallow that light bulb.
Yeah. But like you said, as a fitting conclusion to this episode, it is really about the light inside, the beauty inside, because now she's stuck that way. Just because the directors wanted it to be that way, for no reason other than because, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. It's all about the true beauty inside. Yeah, sure. Why not? I'm going to say suggest it as well. This is a good movie. It's not what I was expecting at all, and I'm perfectly fine with that because, again, I didn't know what to expect. I thought with a name like The Seventh Curse, could have been anything, really. So, yeah. So I really enjoyed it. This was a good one, Mike. This was a good pick. This was a fun movie, too. It was a lot of fun.
But did your parents like it?
I'll go ask him. I have no earthly idea. I will say this much. When people were looking up, there were reactions. So that's a good thing. At least people weren't bored. That's not, at least they're not bored.
There is that.
Yeah. So, so on that note, let's take a break and we'll play a preview for the next Culture Cast of Mike White March.
I don't know what you're talking about. What?
Một 球手，二球手，三球手，跟住仆街。
咪好啦，花樣年華，我3張衫啦。
你唔明噶啦，女人23，老個男人33嘅。
戇居。
我今日靚唔靚啊？值幾多分啊？
女人真係茶煲。
你話咩茶煲啊？
麻煩啊，茶煲。你唔知英文嘅咩？睇下你個猛憎樣啊！而家成條街最醜樣係你啊！
你仲有老者下石，人哋而家咁傷心，你都唔安慰下？
你咁就要傷心啊？唔靚就要傷心，咁我咪跳海死咗佢？
你自己好好咩？日賭夜賭，有口話人，冇口話自己，你咪知嘅難話，你係我邊個啊？
好，我咩都唔係，我以後都唔會再理你，你亦都唔好查幫我呢一世人咩都冇，淨係剩翻啲自尊你啊！
我諗佢中意咗我啊，同佢喺一齊，我覺得一啲拘束都冇。但係有一種男人，你會好中意同佢喺埋一齊，不過要你嫁俾佢，你又唔會。佢已經30幾歲人啦，呢次只係初戀，咁你想做咩啊？
呢？我希望有日能夠喺度開翻間餐館仔，門口對住大西洋。我諗嗰陣時啲 friend 都走晒，剩翻我一人，或者連你走埋啦。
That's right. On the next episode, we're going to be taking a look at a film that probably doesn't have blood curses in it. It might.
You never know.
With a title like An Autumn's Tale, I'm going to assume it's not.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more romance in our future, Chris.
Oh, is this a serious movie or is this a fun movie? Do you know? I mean, fun is objective or subjective, obviously.
Yeah, I think there's probably going to be some goofy comedy. And there's definitely going to be some romance. So I'm very curious to see this as well.
Yeah, it won Hong Kong Film Award for Best Film. So it's probably going to be a serious movie, which will be interesting to see some Chow Yun-Fat chops, the acting chops of Mr. Chow Yun-Fat.
I think it's even set in New York City. So
interesting. Yeah. So, speaking of New York City, we'll be joined by the one and only Cullen Gallagher, who lives on the East Coast.
Whoa!
So yeah, whoa, man, what? It's almost like this is on purpose, except I don't think it is, but it just happened to be that way. So until then, Mike, what is going on over at the internet's best movie podcast, The Projection Booth?
We're getting a little saucy this month. We were talking about some adult films over there. So I did warn the listeners, if you want to, if you're under 18, definitely you don't want to hear talk about pornography. So come on over and hear about blood curses and the Culture Cast.
Right.
But if you are a fan of pornography, then come on over to the Projection Booth this month. We will not disappoint. So that is available at projectionboothpodcast.com.
I'll say that's why you're here listening to this show, because you're under the age of 18.
That's right. I'm sure I have a lot of very young listeners. I'm sure my demographics are not 35 to 55 white males in America.
Yes. I don't think so either.
Yes. That would be very surprising if that was the case, wouldn't
it? Yeah, right. Oh my God. Yeah, well, please your demographic, but do what you like. I can't do what makes you happy. Yeah, and that's why I'm not on any episodes this month of your show, because I am also under the age of 18. So I cannot watch these films.
Legally unavailable. Yes.
Exactly. As for me, you are here already, so you know where to go, culturecast.com. cstachaw.com is my link tree, cstachaw.com. That's where you can go for the other stuff that Mike and I work on. Columbo, that's called The Shaggy Detective. We're doing another show called Dreams for Sale. What else? Barney Miller, Rankin on Bass. Man, the list continues.
Yeah, it's wild. Ever
growing. Scary Stories We Tell. You've been on an episode of that, but you don't have to do it every week like I do, because you're not insane. So yeah, that's where you can find all that stuff. And make sure to circle back for the next episode.